Welcome to the Elite Dangerous Universe, Commander. My name is Drew Wager, one of the official authors who contributed to the narrative of the game. If you're just starting out and want a guide to the background lore, you've come to the right place. This is the Elite Dangerous Timeline. The Great Age of Exploration occurred on the Earth between the 15th and 17th centuries. European explorers set out to discover new lands, find trade routes, seek treasure, and gain territory for their patrons. Much of the world was mapped, and many world civilizations came into contact with each other, often with disastrous results. But the timeline starts in the 20th century. This was the first century in which humanity finally mastered the powers that would propel it out of Earth's protective cradle. Honed in world wars, and starting with simple chemical devices, humanity broke the bonds of gravity before mastering the simplest forms of nuclear power. The first ventures into space were fraught with difficulty and uncertainty, but marked with historic achievements, including the first landing on the Moon and semi-permanent facilities in Earth orbit. The 21st century commenced with the first crewed flights beyond Earth orbit, but before much more could be achieved, the Earth was plunged back into a conflict that quickly spread to engulf the entire planet. It was the third and the last World War, subjecting the Earth and its people to massive environmental damage due to thermonuclear weapons. The familiar political landscape that had been established for decades was lost. Most governments ceased to exist, and only the United States of America survived intact in a recognizable form. As the remaining political structures coalesced in the aftermath of war, this primary government became the Federation of the United States. Meanwhile, corporations, many commanding more power and resources than some of the old countries did prior to the war, grew in strength. Capitalism regained its grip on the minds of business leaders, and the first viable colonies on the Moon and Mars were established. Long-distance telescopic surveys of nearby worlds revealed dozens of planets that could support human life, and the first generation ship was launched in the year 2097, its occupants seeking a fresh start and a new beginning elsewhere in the galaxy. In the 22nd century, with Earth still trying to deal with the massive environmental impacts of the war, many more generation ships were sent out. Records are incomplete for this time period, but indications are that perhaps up to 70,000 vessels were sent, mostly sponsored by corporations looking to stake new claims out in the void. Many were sent out ill-prepared and have never been located. They may still be out there, travelling in the inky blackness of space. Automated probes had reconnoitred the nearby systems, and colonies were established in the Delta Pavonis, Beta Hydrae, and Altair systems. Those with wealth saw these new locales as ways to escape the polluted and harsh reality of the Earth, and mass exodus took place, unregulated and uncontrolled, fueled by fanciful stories of vast tracts of land, exotic monsters, and the romance of space travel. Tau Ceti, another nearby system, was also settled, but was quickly found to be home to an indigenous alien species. Life for the original colonists was harsh, and their priority was to preserve their own existence at any cost. Concerned at reports filtering back, Earth sent inspectors to assess many of the new cultures, finding unregulated destruction of the local environments. Trade sanctions were ultimately imposed, and tensions grew between the fledgling colonies and the Earth administration. Technology advanced quickly in this era, with the discovery of hyperspatial manipulation by Ling Kui Yao, signalling an end to the era of generation ships. The technology was complex though, difficult to use and harder to engineer, only accessible to the biggest corporations of the time due to the incredible expense. Curious and unexplained fossils were found on Mars, leading some to speculate Earth had been visited by a spacefaring culture in the past. In the 23rd century, after more than 100 years of restorative work, the environment on Earth was improving, but the perception that both travel and new destinations was both more fashionable and provided greater opportunity was firmly established, humanity would never be bound to a single planet again. Leaked reports from Tau Ceti indicated the ecological destruction there continued, and mindful of what had happened on Earth, the government decreed to stop this happening elsewhere. A task force consisting of the first military armada in space was sent to Tau Ceti in 2240, with orders to subdue the colony and remove the incumbent administration. Without any ships to defend themselves, the colony targeted the incoming Earth fleet from the ground, resulting in a stalemate, whereby the attacking ships could not land and the colony could not repel the invaders. Diplomacy eventually resumed, and the result was the Federal Accord, signed in 2242. The Federation of the United States became the Federation of Star Systems, quickly shortened to simply the Federation. Mars, the fourth planet in the solar system, was terraformed during this period. With the ongoing political tensions, other notable personages left Sol and headed out away from the newly established colonies, seeking to establish themselves far beyond the new political regimes. One such leader was Marlene Duval, a wealthy Earth woman who set out to colonize the Achenar system. She sought to establish a freer society than the excessively authoritarian one the Federation had become. Her ambitions were short-lived, however. Scant months after her arrival, she was killed in what was reported to be a flying accident. Leadership passed to her brother, one Henson Duval, who immediately invoked a strict imperialistic regimen, and the galaxy's first empire came into existence. Female children were prevented from being born by genetic techniques, ensuring a strict line of male descent. Henson Duval became the first emperor and established the Duval dynasty, a line still unbroken today. One particular note of interest was that a curious alien relic was discovered in space during this period, its origin still unknown today. It's also worth mentioning that the first recorded mention of the word Raxler dates from this period, in the journals of Art Tornquist, in the year 2296. In the 24th century, reports filtered back to Earth that the colonists of Achenar and their nascent empire had wiped out a sentient race of beings on Achenar 6D, the primary colony of the system. Coupled with the refusal of imperial leaders to join the Federation sent a battle fleet to take control of the system in 2324. The imperial fleet was far smaller than the imposing federal force, but they had the home field advantage, with the Federation struggling to hold its supply lines together. The conflict raged on for decades, and many organisations such as the Sirius Corporation, founded in 2339, grew exceedingly rich on providing arms, weapons and fuel to support the federal offensive. A decisive battle was fought on the edges of the Achenar system, which turned into a rout of federal ships. Achenar had triumphed, and the battle is known today as the Great Battle of Liberation. The war was concluded in the year 2380, with the Federation forced to look elsewhere for new resources, and the Empire embarking on its own rapid campaign of expansion. Many new colonies were forced to choose allegiance between one or other of these new superpowers. In the 25th century, a new wave of colonial missions embarked from federal space. One very notable set of colonies was established in what, at the time, were known as the Far Colonies, and later became known as the Old Worlds, centred around the systems Lave, Dizo, Tianisla and Listi. Initially dismissed by the Federation as resource poor, scientists in these systems stumbled across a unique power source known as Quirium, powerful enough to rival the Sirius Corporation monopoly. With their remarkably advanced technology, these worlds quickly established themselves as a significant trading partner and power bloc. The dawn of the 26th century greeted renewed political tensions in the depths of space. The Old Worlds declared their independence from both the Federation and the Empire. Revolutions on various colonies, notably those in the Alioth system, were put down, often brutally, by either the Federation or the Empire, depending on their respective locations. Independent systems learned to either keep a low profile or cede their allegiance to one or other superpower. The period was fraught with minor skirmishes and system-to-system wars, the period was fraught with minor skirmishes and system-to-system wars, with the corporations making huge profits by supplying opposing sides. So big did some of these corporations become, they eventually came to dominate entire star systems, or even small sectors. In the 27th century, the third major galactic power emerged, formed from the growing coalition of the Old Worlds, whose influence had grown notably in the previous century. The Galactic Cooperative of Worlds, swiftly shortened to GalCop, was formed in 2696. This governmental body held jurisdiction over activities within the space lanes of the Old World galactic sectors, but did not extend its rules to individual member worlds, allowing them to carry on with their own destinies. Member worlds contributed to a cooperative police force and navy for defence and administrative purposes. The Federation and the Empire took a very dim view of this, severing ties with the newly established GalCop. Any ships bearing the flag of GalCop, and any individual swearing allegiance to it, were declared persona non grata within both existing superpowers. GalCop navigation systems were set not to show the worlds of either Federation or the Empire on star charts. The First Interstellar Cold War had begun. GalCop technology continued to advance rapidly, dramatically exceeding both the capability of the Federation and the Empire. Around the beginning of the 28th century, something of a revolution occurred in both ship and onboard systems technology. Hyperdrive, long the sole preserve of only enormous ships supplied by rich corporations, became available in modularized and compact units, allowing the fitment of the technology to smaller vessels that could be operated by small commercial outfits or even lone pilots with the necessary means. The familiar Python vessel draws its genesis from this era, soon followed by the Viper. With a growing population of itinerant space travellers, spaceports began to appear in many systems, with the first Coriolis space station being constructed in the Lave system during 2752. Many more were to follow, and humanity rapidly expanded its influence in the galaxy. Many systems, originally on the frontier of explored space, quickly found themselves back in the suburbs. GalCop in particular was able to mould its Quirium technology into a high-speed hyperdrive unit, far exceeding the capabilities of ships within the Federation or the Empire. Somewhere around this time, the first legends of a spacefaring group of travellers known as the Dark Wheel filtered back from the depths of space. They became inextricably linked with the legend of Raxxla. To enable rapid, controlled, and above all reliable hyperspace transit between systems, the Faraway network was established, consisting of a complex series of monitoring satellites, branch lines, stop points and rescue stations. At this time, ships required extensive pre-jump configuration by station-based faraway orientation system controllers, known as FOSC or SysCon. Hyperspacing ships also required external help to initiate the jump. The systems were known for a certain sensitivity in operation, with the dangers of a misconfigured jump being listed as atomic reorganization and time displacement. Unsupervised jumps were extremely dangerous. It was around this time that the phrase "witch space" entered the commander's lexicon. Its precise origin is uncertain, but it seems to stem from the risk inherent in the early hyperspace technology. This concludes part 1 of the Elite Dangerous timeline. Ride on, Commanders.